Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone. I am finally bringing you a review for the new Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom Leader Class Galvatron. This is a toy that I have very much struggled to get a hold of. He's the last part of the third wave for me to obtain. I've gotten everything else, including the Titan class and the Commander class, well before him. He's just eluded me for a long time. But thanks to some nearly blink and you miss it orders popping up on GameStop's website, I was actually able to procure one of these. So here, now we can finally do this review, and I'm very excited for it. So, if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Galvatron's packaging, then we're going to open it up. We'll see the instructions for the toy, we'll see his golden disc card, and then we'll see Galvatron himself in both his cannon and robot modes. Sadly, I don't think he has the little handgun pistol mode, at least not officially. They didn't use the old submarine trick on this guy like they did for, say, Six Shot. But, oh well, I mean, it's not a mode that's ever been shown off beyond just the original toy. Speaking of the original toy, I will be doing some group shots and comparisons today, including that one, as well as the Titans Return Galvatron, so we can really see how the design holds up to the original, the most recent update, all that. And then, of course, at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Galvatron comes in your standard leader class packaging for Kingdom, including a whole bunch of wraparound artwork of both the alt mode and the robot mode, with the volcano and the arc in the background. And as you can see, you may not be able to tell from here, but I'm very happy to report that my Galvatron does not have the inverted shoulder issue. For anyone unaware, there are some Galvatrons out there that were assembled with the shoulders attached upside down, basically, so they sit a lot lower against his torso than they should, and it looks really weird. In fact, a lot of the early photos that they had showing off Galvatron had the messed up shoulders, which gave a lot of people a very bad impression of this toy. They're like, man, he looks weird. Luckily, once you fix it, his proportions look a little better. He looks less like a gorilla with like low-hanging long arms. So I am happy I don't have to do the fix for that, because there is a way to fix it, and there are ways to do it without damaging the toy, but it requires you kind of like knocking out some pins and stuff, and I hate getting that invasive with plastic because it doesn't hold up very well to fiddling. So anyway, you can see Galvatron here. You can also see his cannon off to the side. And then he's also got his other weapons, which we'll get to. All right, so you saw that artwork. They cut across the top with a box cutter, because of course they did. Can't have nice things. All right, so here we get the renders for the toy. And they're actually very simple. It doesn't show off a whole lot. So you get the alt mode and the robot mode. It takes 33 steps to transform, which is not bad. It's pretty good. They show off the Matrix chain accessory that you can't really see in the packaging where it's at, but that's meant to be a reference, obviously, to the 86 movie, since that is a big theme of this year, being the 35th anniversary of that movie. So that's, the chain with the Matrix on it that he dons while he's inside Unicron. Very cool. And it is a completely different piece than the matrices that come with, your Autobot leaders since Earthrise. And of course, I'll, show a comparison to that. One thing they really don't point out here is those extra guns we mentioned. You can see them on the sides of the cannon mode, and then you can also see them on his back, oddly enough. They're not showing him wielding those. And each one of these guns resembles his ship, the Revenge from Transformers the movie. Though, oddly enough, done up in gray instead of purple like they should be. So, I don't know. Now, this was initially believed to have been included with the character so that you can take one of those ships and put them on the little flight stand for the HasLab Unicron, which you still might be able to do. I got to test that theory, see if they have the connection port on the bottom or not. But we did just recently see a leak of a reformatting Galvatron that had been rumored previously, and it includes a bunch of little accessories, including slug figure-like characters, and then several spaceships, including the Quintesson one, the Junkion one, and the Revenge in a much smaller scale, one that scales a lot better with Unicron and with the Arc accessory that comes with them and all that. So it does make these kind of redundant, and honestly, I'm really not a fan of this approach. They do combine to form like a railgun thing, but it looks kind of silly. I don't know why they didn't just give him his blaster that came with the original toy. I'm guessing they just did this to give him big chunks of plastic to help flesh out the price point, because this guy is small. Yeah, there's your Kingdom side panel, by the way. Yeah, he's Voyager sized, and Yeah, there's a lot of debate around this guy, like there are, anytime we get a rather undersized character and a price point is he really worth the amount they're charging? And of course, we're going to cover that because that's a topic that, I put a lot of stock into personally. All right, so without any further delay, let's go ahead and open this guy up. Okay, here's our Fate Reveal card. This one has Megatron on it. You get him just kind of stalking upon some hapless enemy, and you get your Beast Warriors fighting in the background. We go ahead and peel this back. And we get Galvatron. And the text right here just reads, becomes Galvatron. So this is a very fitting inclusion. It's not often that I've... actually, I think it's the first time I've gotten a Kingdom character where the card that comes with them is that character, so that's really interesting. So yeah, this is the most well-known fate for Megatron, at least in the cartoon continuity, is just he becomes Galvatron. So here it is, plain and simple. Not the most exciting thing in the world, but still pretty cool to get a card of Galvatron, I guess. Here we get Galvatron's instructions, and they're pretty thick. Kind of surprised. So you get the name, render the toy here, branding, all that. Open this up. You get your how-to for where to place his accessories, how to combine his two revenge ship things into a railgun. This also shows you how to store them on the back. And when I get to this point, I want to point out that I think the instructions are wrong here. You see how high they have them set, and you can set them this high, but I don't think that's the intention, and we'll get to that. I think they just kind of goofed there. All right, so then we get our transformation from robot all the way to his cannon mode, which wraps around on the back, shows you where to store the weapons, where to store his matrix chain, all that fun stuff, then the finished product. So the little booklet's surprisingly big for having such simple instructions, right? He's not a triple changer this time, at least not officially. So I think they just kind of made everything bigger to justify giving him bigger instructions. And now we see Galvatron in his infamous cannon mode. And he's got all the accessories attached here. You get your two little blasters or revenge ships attached to the sides there for added firepower. And you get the matrix chain down here, which actually attaches via a little notch. So you see that little slot right there, this thing. So it plugs it in to hold it in place and keep it from just flopping around on the barrel there. So I do like that, I appreciate that. It's not just hanging loosely, like this thing's a bit of an afterthought. You also get the base part of his signature cannon over here, just kind of stored on the back and bulking out the cannon a little bit. And it's interesting, so the original toy, the cannon barrel separated from the main part too. Though on the original toy, there was no way to store it on the cannon mode. Same thing with his rifle, and basically any of his accessories didn't store on the cannon mode, so he had to set them aside, which was a shame. This is a really interesting little touch here. Part of the lower legs flips down and becomes just kind of a back stand to make this kind of like a tripod, which is definitely a new take on that whole thing. The original Galvatron, he just rested on his little gun handle that was just kind of running along the bottom there. And the Titans Return one really just balances on the two treads. Speaking of treads, I'm surprised this guy actually has working wheels underneath, both on these main tread bits here and on this little stand thing that flips down from his feet. So he can roll across the ground, though the wheels don't contact the surface very well. It's a little rough. They are rolling, though. But the rest of the plastic's also catching a bit, too. Now, I will say the cannon mode's impressive for its bulk. It does end up looking pretty substantial. I also think it kind of looks like something thrown together in a junkyard. Like, I know that's mean, but it looks very cobbled together, right? It doesn't look very smooth or whole, which in my opinion is probably the worst part of this toy. Like, the cannon mode's got the right shape and everything, and it's big and intimidating, but it really just looks like a bunch of scrap metal cobbled together. It doesn't give the look of a proper form, right? Looks like somebody took Galvatron apart like he was made of Legos and then just cobbled them back together in a different shape. So I don't know, I'm really torn on the cannon mode. I mean, it's nice and sturdy. It's got some cool things going on. But I still think the final product just doesn't look right. Actually, it kind of looks more like a Movieverse character than a G1 character, right? Or Movieverse, they were kind of known for looking like just piles of scrap metal flashing around on screen, whereas G1 had a much simpler, much smoother aesthetic. This does feel more like a Bayverse toy than anything, in this mode anyway. So, yeah, I don't know, I'm very torn on the cannon mode, and I think it's definitely my least favorite thing about this Galvatron. Okay, here we get our first group shot. On the left, we have the original Generation 1 Galvatron that I managed to find at my local comic shop. And it's came fully complete, had the instructions, all that, so I'm really happy with it. Though the stickers are starting to peel something awful, and I'm half tempted to toy hacks this guy. And I'm a little on the fence about that because I imagine throwing unofficial stickers on him is really going to hurt the value of the toy. So, I don't know. I'm a little torn on what to do with it. But they are starting to peel up pretty badly. It may be time to just throw replacements on there. And then over here on the right, we have Titan's Return Galvatron, which is the most recent entry for the character prior to this new one. And they're all doing something quite different. Like, they're all trying to nail the same idea. And they all have this kind of general look to them with the long orange barrel here, the two treads on like arms coming down, the fin type structure on the top, and then this kind of long rifle butt type thing going on in the back, which is made of the legs. So they all carry that same idea, and then they execute it in different ways. I mentioned that this version just kind of balances on the handle for the laser pistol mode, and then this guy just balances on the treads themselves. You can tip him back onto there, but really the treads just kind of keep him suspended. And luckily, the joints are strong enough to where they hold him up just fine, that you really don't need a third bit to keep this thing steady. And then our new one just kind of goes for something different. It's still resting on a third leg here, but the third leg's very, very different from the original. So, as I was saying, with this new Galvatron, he looks very cobbled together, and I think that's a function of the fact that he is the most complex one out of all three of these. Now, the original toy, being a G1 toy, is relatively simple in design, and the plus side is that it just kind of makes for a very complete and smooth looking weapon mode here, right? There's not a whole bunch of like panels flopping around there. It's very smooth. And even the Titan's Return one just seems to be a little more whole than our new one. And honestly, I think this, I kind of feel like this one's weapon mode is a little bit better, which, you know, is sure kind of blasphemous, but it just seems less compromised by trying to emulate like a perfect cartoon design in the robot mode. So I'm a little torn. Even though this guy is very, very hefty in this mode, it just doesn't feel as good as either of these other two. Okay, here's a look at our G1 Galvatron in its laser pistol mode, just so you can see what that looked like. And then over here is the Titan's Return Galvatron in its spaceship mode that a lot of people speculate, because the way it looks when you hold it upside down, that it's supposed to be like a workaround pistol mode, kind of like Six Shot had his submarine mode, right? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think it was ever confirmed that was the case. And then here is just kind of my approximation of what a pistol mode for this toy might look like. So really all I did was flip up this little wheeled bit right here to make this into like a handle. And then I rotated the arms and brought them up kind of out of the way. And I mean, it makes a fairly convincing looking little laser pistol. I think more so than the Titan's Return one. Again, it's kind of weird that they didn't engineer some kind of third mode into this guy, because Galvatron's traditionally been a triple changer, and if they're trying to go back to basics and recreate and update the original G1 toy, it is kind of a shame for them to just completely drop one of his modes entirely. Like, I get that they're really squeamish about doing the toy gun thing, though the ban here in the US is on realistic toy guns, so, I mean, who's holding up a bank with this, you know? Go figure. But yeah, it's this is my best guess on what an intended laser pistol mode might look like for this toy. I'm sure you guys could probably come with something better, but I think it looks pretty decent anyway. Okay, now it's time to do our transformation. So the first thing I want to do is remove your extra accessories. Little revenge gun things need to come off. So this is how they attach. These notches right here, and 2 little slots, one on each side, so that when, you know, regardless of which one you put where, they're symmetrical. So you just work those off a little bit. The matrix, pop it free from the little slot on the chest, slide it off the barrel, move that out of the way. This is your cleaner, more pure G1 looking cannon mode, if you want to go that route. All right, you're also going to remove this bad boy. And the barrel. And we can go ahead and connect them together now. If you want to do that. Just get it on there, looking nice. All right, now as far as the main body, I'm going to flip this bit in, swing the feet up, pop these little hip skirt things off the shoulders, fold these up and out of the way like so. Then you're going to detach the legs from the back area, swing them forward, which is going to kind of pop this out. The instructions don't seem to realize that they have you bring this down, and they think it's going to go all the way into place while the legs are down. It's not. You got to bring the legs back before this will push in all the way. So just something to be aware of there. All right, then you want to pop this off, fold it all the way back as far as it'll go. Lift this section up. You're going to rotate it back until this notch goes into the slot here, like so. And then here, you want to pull this piece free. And it can be kind of hard to get loose sometimes because it plugs in there very tightly. So you need a good bit of force to get this free. You may have to fight with it a little bit. There we go. Okay, so get that back down in there. You're going to flip this chest piece up. You're going to use it to rotate the head outward. Just keeps popping up until this clicks into place here. Close this little back drum thing back up. Close this back panel like so. Then you're gonna attach his shoulder panels up here so everything clicks into place nice and flush. Fix his little shoulder pylon doohickeys. You're gonna bring these back, swing them up and against the back of his arms. Untab his wrists from his shoulders. Flip the fists out. Get the elbows nice and situated, like so. All right, so we get all that. Oops, popped the shoulder loose. All right, the hip skirt things. Those are pretty much just gonna fall to the side. Make sure they're going across like that. Detach the legs from each other, spin them around. Flip out his little heel spurs right there. Then you get these little panels on the sides. You're gonna pop them free, rotate them back, and plug them in across the backs of his legs. Like so. Alrighty. Here we go. Pivot the ankles, do what you gotta do to get them looking nice. Oh yeah, we need to flip this bit up too before I forget. So take this little fin piece, bring it loose, get it up and over the top to form his signature little back spike thing. Okay, here we go. This is Galvatron's robot mode in all its glory. And I gotta say, in robot mode, he looks absolutely great. He's very clean looking. He looks almost exactly like he does in the 86 movie in the cartoon. And they really, really nailed this character's look. Now the back is a little bit messier. You can see, you know, parts like in his back area, backs of his legs are just kind of packed in there, which is kind of inevitable because he does have to transform, right? He's not going to look exactly like the show model. But it's done in a really good way to where there's not a bunch of like kibble just kind of sticking off everywhere. There's not a huge backpack. Everything's tucked in nice and neatly. So I do give them props for that. They managed to make this work pretty well. Of course, we got to do our accessories. So you get his typical fusion cannon. I don't know, is this still called the fusion cannon? I forget if the name changes when it becomes Galvatron or not. So So there's that, very iconic looking. And you can bling him up with his matrix chain. And it just hangs loosely. It doesn't plug into anything this time, but gravity works more in your favor this time around. So you can do that and leave it at that if you want to. Keep it very purely 86 movie. Or we can bring in his 2 revenge guns. And you have options, right? You can store them on his back if you don't want him wielding them. And like I was saying, the instructions have you use these same slots that you use in the cannon mode. And you can, and it makes them stick really high up off his back and looks kind of silly. But the instructions don't point out is that there's a 3rd slot right here, which is like the exact same size. And if you push that onto these tabs, it goes on his back just fine. It's nice and centered, and they're not sticking way up and looking like silly kibble. I think this was the intended way of doing it, and that just kind of got lost in translation when they made the instructions, because that looks a lot better than, you know, how they were proposing. So that's the way I would recommend doing it personally. I think that was the intended way. Or, of course, you can have him wield these guys, and they each have a notch and a slot right here. So you can make them face each other, combine them together like this, have him wield it as a big railgun. And I mean, it looks okay. It looks kind of cool. Honestly, I think it works better when it's less obviously just a miniature version of a starship, because like it's a neat Easter egg, but it's kind of silly, right? They'd be like if Optimus Prime was walking around with like arc cannons. Like, cool, I get the reference, but is that necessary? So at least when you put them together like this, it's less obvious that they're supposed to look like a ship. It just looks like a big old railgun. So yeah, personally, again, I really would have preferred if they had just skipped this whole gimmick and just included his standard rifle from the original toy. And I think the only reason they did it this way is to fluff up the price point, because this guy's a very, very small leader. I think they just needed to add gobs of gray plastic onto him where they could, just to try to justify the $50 price point. All right, here's our group shot with the other Galvatrons and their robot modes. And you can see they're all 3 very, very different takes on the design. You have the original toy, which was very strongly based on the early sketches from Floro Dairy before they decided to alter all of his concepts for the big screen. And as such is, you know, mostly gray with purple as an accent. Then our Titans Return figure is actually very heavily inspired by the IDW Comics interpretation of the character. So it's much more stylized and much more barbarian looking than your standard Galvatron. And personally, I know a lot of people like dunking on the Titans Return Galvatron. I personally love the toy. I love the way it looks. I think the transformation for him is really good. The only problem I have with him, and it's, you know, the most common complaint, is the head, right? Because he was part of Titans Return, he had to be a headmaster guy. And the way they executed it, with giving him like a flip-up crown that doesn't really sit well on his face, like, I get that. And if they went and retooled this toy and just took out the headmaster gimmick and just gave him a standard Galvatron head, he'd be 1,000 times better in my book. I mean, I think the idea was always there because his opening chest panel is much bigger than it needs to be to fit the crown inside. I think, like, early designs for this toy, he originally just had a head that flipped up, and then they changed it to compensate for the line-wide gimmick. I really think so. But everything else about him is really, really good. He's got a very high level of articulation for a Titans Return toy. He's got the ankle pivot and all that stuff. So, yeah, I super dig the toy. I don't care if people hate him. I think he's cool. And apparently Takara thought he was good because he was the basis for their Select Super Megatron, who's another awesome toy. But I'll get off my soapbox now. Now, lastly, we come to our new Galvatron, who is more so than any other version before him based off of the character's on-screen appearance. And I think he manages to pull that off very, very well. He hits all the major beats, the proportions are good. I think his feet might be a little small. That's one of the things I noticed when they first released pictures of him. It looks kind of almost more like he has hooves than actual feet because they're not wider than his ankle area, but I don't know. It could just be me being nitpicky. You know what I just realized we didn't do? We didn't look at his articulation yet. Let's do that right now. So he's got the ball-jointed head, of course. He's got universal shoulders. Now his kibble gets in the way a little bit, but also pivots around, so it gives you some leeway. He's got the universal shoulders. bicep swivel, double bend elbows, so he can get those really nice deep bends and hold his cannon up, which is cool. And he has wrist swivel, which is nice. Sadly, no posable fingers, and you'd think for a leader class toy that might be a thing they would do, especially when like Optimus has posable fingers, but oh well. He has full waist articulation, though the kibble can get in the way on the back. He's got the hip skirt things that flap upward. His pelvic bit actually flips up too to compensate his legs moving around. The hips are in universal joints, thigh swivel, single bend knees, which get to just under 90 degrees, and then of course your ankle tilt. No rocking, just tilt, sadly, but pretty adequate amount of articulation. Now, personally, for the amount they're charging for this guy, I really would have liked to have seen them do posable fingers. Like, he shouldn't feel like a step down from Optimus in any way, but he kind of does in some ways. I also didn't really gripe about the hollow forearms. Those bother me a bit. Again, leader class toy and a small one. Oh yeah, speaking of small, guess who he's shorter than? This guy. The toy that costs half as much as him. Now yes, I know height's not everything. I'm aware of that. And no, I don't think he's worth the same amount as this toy. He's definitely a more complex figure. But given the fact that he's literally smaller than his Voyager class version from several years ago, is he really worth twice as much? Literally twice as much. And let's bump this guy's price tag up to 30, which is what Voyagers cost more, or what they cost now. It's still $20 more. I don't see it. We'll get into it more as, you know, we get toward the end of the review. I also want to touch on his battle damage. It's not very heavy. It's mostly scuffing around the ankles, and then he's got some light purple like scratches on his chest and his forearms. A lot of people are really put off by that. It doesn't bother me too much. I think it's some of the better battle damage paint we've seen in War for Cybertron. Some of it just looks like, you know, somebody splashed silver paint on a figure. It is weird, though, that they did put the battle damage on him, because they've really largely moved away from that. Like, it was heavy in Siege, they had a little bit in Earthrise, and then by the time Kingdom rolled around, they were really trying to stay away from it. For some reason, they decided Galvatron needed to be kind of banged up looking, though. I don't know why. I mean, I guess it does make him look a little more battle-worn, and again, it is done pretty well. It's definitely one of the better battle damage paint applications I've seen in War for Cybertron, but it's an odd choice. I don't know if there's anyone out there that would have preferred the battle damage. I think most people looking for a screen-accurate Galvatron probably would have preferred something a little different. Another thing I want to point out, since we have this comparison going, is I don't know if it's an intended feature or not, but you get some leeway with the shoulder pylon things. You know, right here is their pretty typical placement for how he looks in the cartoon, but they can rotate out. So if you want something that looks a little closer to how they're oriented on the original toy, you do have that option. I don't know if they put that there on purpose or not, or it's just a function of the transformation, but it is an option you have if you want to go that route. And it'll look really good on his Selects release, because if you don't know, he is getting a Generation Selects release as a Toy Colors Galvatron. So he's going to have the coloration much more akin to this toy. And he's also going to come with like an old school sticker sheet, which is going to emulate a lot of the details on this guy. Now, personally, I think it's a huge missed opportunity that they don't officially call that toy Galvatron 2, because the Toy Colors version has kind of officially become known as that character from the comics, since he utilized those colors more or less. But they're going with Toy Colors Galvatron, or just Galvatron. I think that's a big shame. I want to see more official recognition of that very interesting Marvel Comics character. Real quick, I wanted to show you guys that due to the magic of the 5mm port system that's been a thing since all the way back in G1, our new Galvatron can indeed wield the rifle from the original toy. So that's something I find cool. If you happen to own the original, you can always deck this guy out with his gun. It's a little big for him, and you can see he can't bend his arm very far because of the long, like, buttstock thing going on in the back. Is that what they call it? A buttstock? I don't know. I'm not a gun guy. I'm sorry. I also want to point out that the upcoming Selects figure, the, Toy Colors or Galvatron 2 one, whatever you want to call it, His railgun pieces are actually cast in black plastic, and I'm guessing the whole point of that is to make them look like this rifle, since this is done up in black. Again, could have saved themselves the trouble if they had just included this instead of weird ship guns. I'm just saying. Oh yeah, and on a side note, I tested out whether or not those ship guns can actually fit on the mini stand for Unicron. They can't. They don't have any port that's compatible with that, unfortunately. So, yeah, they really don't seem to serve much of a purpose at all. You can't even use them if you want to. Here's a fun group shot of Galvatron with his two closest henchmen. On the left, you get Studio Series 86 Scourge, and on the right, you get Kingdom Cyclonus. And this is something people have been waiting on for years, getting good updates of these three characters that all scale well together and, can be displayed on the same shelf and look very coherent. And I gotta say, I think they did a fantastic job with all three of these guys. They are three of the best toys released here in the last year or so. Cyclonus especially. He is a just phenomenal Voyager class toy. So yeah, for everyone just looking to complete their 86 Decepticons, we finally have the pieces we need to get, our main baddies all up there on our shelves, so it's exciting stuff. Of course, we've got to do this one too, our two mortal enemies locked in combat. Get our Kingdom Rodimus Prime. And this is a group shot I've been promising since Rodimus's review, since I did not have Galvatron at the time. I was pretty bitter about that. So now, finally, we can act out all sorts of cool fight scenes between these two. And here's that quick comparison I promised between the two matrices. You can see that Galvatron's new piece is very clearly modeled after the matrix that is included with Rodimus and Hot Rod and Optimus Prime. Like, as far as how they cast it, it's almost identical on the actual matrix part, but it is a different piece of plastic. All this chain here and everything is also part of this molded plastic piece. So they did a really good job of recreating it and making it look like it is the same artifact, just attached to a chain. So I give them kudos for that. It looks really, really good. And another important group shot here. We get Galvatron locked in combat with his other bitter enemy, more specifically from the comics. It's our Kingdom Ultra Magnus. And these two were shown to have a very guttural, violent rivalry. Like, when they went at it, They got, hand to hand, just brutalizing each other. So, felt a shot of Galvatron just socking Ultra Magnus was appropriate for this. And of course, when we get the Selects Galvatron, who's more based on the comics version, gonna have a lot more fun with these group shots with Magnus, because you just gotta have them. They're important. And for our final group shot, I want to do an evolution of the character, at least as far as cartoon continuity is concerned. On the left, we have Earthrise Megatron, who's the closest we're going to get to a pure G1 update since he can't turn into a handgun anymore. And then on our right, we get Generation Select's Super Megatron. / Ultra Megatron / Megatron Omega, since, he's like a quintuple changer. And I gotta say that the three of these look very, very cool together. Even though the Super Megatron is a remold of a toy from an older toy line, particularly the Titans Return Galvatron that we saw earlier, because that mold was really good for its time, and because he dropped the whole Headmaster gimmick, it really just kind of puts him on a level that's very close to, being on par with these guys as far as engineering. And he works really, really well with them. Interestingly, due to the remolding, he ends up being a tiny bit shorter than the Titans Return Galvatron, which does unfortunately make him shorter than our new Galvatron. Would have liked it if the Super Megatron was taller, but it's such a minor thing. So yeah, as a collector, this gets me really excited because you get three quality toys. Granted, I like the Siege Megatron a bit more than Earthrise, but Earthrise is the one with the Earth mode. Just three really awesome interpretations of this character at the three main stages of his life. So yeah, if you're obsessive enough to own all three of these toys, I would count yourself lucky, because this is something that would have been a dream come true back in the late 80s, early 90s. Right? We could have only dreamed of not just having like a very screen-accurate Galvatron toy, but even having a toy of Super Megatron, because originally he was just a comic-only character. He didn't exist in plastic form at all, so just being able to make a group shot like this makes me very, very happy. And that is going to conclude our long-awaited look at the Transformers Kingdom Galvatron. Now, I, for the most part, absolutely love this figure. As far as, is he the best Galvatron? I think that kind of depends on what you're looking at. In robot mode, I'm going to say yes. He is the coolest looking, the most articulated. I do very much love the Titans Return toy for its, IDW-inspired design. It's very stylized and a very neat take. But, some of the engineering quirks with it really just hold it back from shining. Plus, if you're like a more like pure G1er, you're going to want this version, right? You don't want the IDW Comics one. So, yeah, robot mode, easily the best we've ever had. The alt mode is a bit more of a toss-up. It's good. It's very solid, holds together very, very well. It's bulky. It's got all the right looks, but it also still looks very patched together and doesn't look as complete as like the classic toy, the Titans Return one. So that's kind of more up to personal taste, what you prefer in your toy. The value. I gotta say, this toy is clearly worth more than a standard Voyager. He is. He's got the bulk, he's got the engineering, the articulation, all that stuff. So yeah, he's worth more than $30. Is he worth $50? I don't think so. I really don't. And I think, again, this comes to a problem with size classes. They're very spread out, right? You get Voyager, and then the next one up is $20 away. And Hasbro's not going to shortchange themselves, right? If there's cost beaten, it's going to be eaten on your end. So yeah, this guy is clearly worth more than $30 in, modern pricing and all that. But $50, no. $35, $40, yeah, I think that would be a fair asking price in today's market. But even when you give them the big, obnoxious gray chunks of plastic, that really does not justify a $50 price point. I'm sorry, just going by pure value. Now, of course, it could be worth it to you. Obviously, it was to me, right? I was willing to put the money down, but we're not getting a great value. And I feel like that's happening a lot, specifically with leader classes. I would say that if there's any particular size class that keeps giving us the short end of the stick as far as value for a dollar, it's pretty consistently leader class, right? They've generally been very small characters, and even like the quote-unquote big characters aren't very big, right? Look at Double Dealer. He's, a big leader for War for Cybertron, but he's not that big. Like, not a lot bigger than old Voyagers. So it's really hard to swallow that cost and to, say, oh, it's totally worth it, pound for pound, dollar for dollar. I really don't think it is. So it's really going to come down to, do you value this character and getting a good version of him enough to put forth the asking price? It's kind of like the new Star Saber, the HasLab Star Saber that's currently crowdfunding. I think it looks awesome. I love that it comes with Victory Leo. I don't think that's $180 worth of toy. Am I backing it? Yes, I am, because I'm a fool. But also because it's just like the only chance I'm ever going to get at a Victory Leo toy, like an official one. So I begrudgingly am backing the Star Saber. Really wish they would do more with it and, fix like the gappy forearms and stuff on the Saber mode, because that's a big asking price for that. I mean, Unicron was very expensive himself, but he was so one of a kind that it was really hard to quantify just how much he was worth. These guys are more like maybe 2 leader classes, something like that, put together, and they want $180, which is, as much as more than 2 commander classes. So yeah, I don't know. But back on topic, Galvatron. Stay focused, folks. Stay with me. It's not me, it's you. So yeah, I think he's phenomenal. I think if you get him, you're very much going to like him, especially if you get one with the good shoulders. The best way to check, if you don't know, is go ahead and look at this piece right here, that like hinge piece. The smooth side should be facing up when his arms are down. If it's not, unfortunately, you have upside down shoulders and they're going to set lower than normal. And then the only thing you can do about that is either have the screw holes facing forward or have them with low shoulders. And then you got to decide, do you want to try to mess with this thing and pop them off and remove the pin? That's entirely up to you. There are plenty of videos out there that'll show you how to do that. I don't have a copy like that, so I can't demonstrate for you. And I wouldn't want to tear this guy apart unnecessarily. But even if you get the one with the low shoulders, it's not a super hard fix. So yeah, I personally recommend picking this guy up if you have the money and if you think he's worth the cost. Of course, that is just my opinion of this toy. Now, I really want to know what you all think of Galvatron. I've been waiting a long time for this conversation. So, you know, go ahead and comment down in the comment section. Tell me, do you like him? Do you not like him? Do you think he's worth the money? I'm sure some people are like, you're an idiot. He's clearly worth the $50. Like, that's fine. I mean, prefer if you be nice about it, but tell me why. Give me a counter argument. I'd love to hear it. And, you know, did you enjoy this review on him? Did I show you all the, you know, group shots you want to see? Or was there something else you would have liked to see? Any and all feedback's always welcome down below. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. And thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new and long-awaited Transformers Kingdom Leader Class Galvatron. And with all that said, I will see you next time.